All right, Hafa good morning, everyone. My name is Livia Murati. I'm the founder of Eno Wellness Collective, and we are on a mission to inspire a holistic, healthy lifestyle and movement here on Guam. We do that through various events, retreats, coaching programs all around holistic health, and really empowering people with tools like yoga and meditation and sound healing, journaling, all the things. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Liv, were you yogaing in there earlier?
I wasn't.
Okay.
Should I be?
I went over there to get a chair, and people were just like, wow.
That was me.
Wow. Didn't buy a ticket for this. Okay. Go ahead, we'll move through.
Hi everyone, my name is Via DeFont. I'm the publicist at the University of Guam Press, but I'm also the project manager for our Remembering Billy Suicide Prevention Project, which is a series of initiatives that include publications, craft workshops, creative conversations, and soon a documentary, all aimed at finding ways to use creative expression as a way to prevent or talk about mental wellness.
I love that. Thank you so much and welcome, Via. And finally, go ahead.
Hi, good morning everyone. Hafa Day. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Audrey Beneventi and I'm the project director for Project PATH, and that stands for Preventing Addiction Through Health Empowerment. And our program, or my program specifically, is a prescription medication misuse and illicit drug use program.
Okay, yeah. Never before have I heard cheering for that. Drug use, woo! No. Different program, obviously a big thing we gotta tackle here. And I think that the big binding factor between all three of our organizations and what we're talking about here is just this kind of, I don't wanna call it unconventional, but definitely a different way, a different path, a different angle, if you will, no pun intended, to getting people the help that they need and helping to prevent the further degradation of families and of communities through these outlets. My first question is, why? Why did you or your team or your group think this could work in terms of applying what you guys do to this kind of a project?
I can kick us off. All right, so I moved home at the beginning of 2020 to launch Eno Wellness Collective. I grew up here, was raised here, went away for college, and decided after many years away to come back, because every time I came back home, every time I knew I wanted to plant roots here, but I saw that there was a huge gap in the conversation around wellness. And so even in 2020, I was noticing that when people thought of health and wellness, most of the time it started with the physical. Right? We all love a 5K, we all love a Biggest Loser challenge, or on the challenge mentality. But there was a big missing piece, not even with just mental health, but how do we really activate a holistic wellness mentality, thinking about relationships, thinking about our joy, thinking about the whole person. And so that was really the driver behind wanting to start not just a business, but really a movement around how do we get people to think about health in all these different ways, and how do we attract people that maybe would never even step foot into something like a yoga class or meditation, or, oh, that's for, I'm not flexible, or I can't do that, and how do we start to make it more accessible for people here, accessible price-wise, but also accessible in terms of the types of offerings that people can tap into. Because you never know how someone can find something and be like, that's my thing, right? That's gonna be in my toolkit for my mental health, spiritual health. So it started with what I saw as kind of a gap in the conversation, and has just blown up since the past couple of years, and really bringing this movement to Guam.
And I think that you can say, everything you've just said, and with good substance. I know a lot of my prims, right? So I'm half Chamorro, half Filipino, so I'm very confused. But there's a lot of things that culturally, hey, do what's up, bro, like that. But for some of my prims, they got no neck, but they do yoga. And so it helps them when they're doing all those things. And I asked them, Prim, is this helping you out or what? And they're really, really surprised at the fact that, for me, yoga is
Demonstration, please.
Like this, no? But, hold on, I gotta get back up. But for a lot of people, it's different in the way that you apply it, and different in ways that it can kind of address different situations. So I do want to start off by saying that thank you for coming back home. Thank you for bringing that mindset here and for giving us, as an island, an opportunity to experience that. Because maybe if you didn't come back and start to yoga, I know personally, I didn't know much about yoga until I started talking with you when you came back. So I would just look like a tilapia on the floor. So I'm very glad. Thank you so much for coming back.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Liv was saying, she said something really insightful is that there's a gap in these conversations, especially around mental wellness and prevention. And so for the press specifically, we are a community-based publisher. And so what that means is we respond to the direct needs of our community. And so it's interesting because this all sparked in 2021 when we launched the book Dry Nights, which is a collection of poetry.
Yep.
I'm not sure if some of you have heard it. It's a great book. But it's a collection of poetry by Pep Borja, who's a really talented writer, and he touches on several topics that may seem taboo in public conversation. So longing, regret, addiction, suicide, and what's even more is that it was coming from a male's perspective, which you don't often see. And so what we found is when we launched this book, a lot of people responded specifically to what we feel is the heart of the poetry collection. It's titled Billy, and it's a poem about a friend who he had lost to suicide when they were just in high school. And so this really sparked in our minds, like, you know, we're not therapists, we don't provide clinical services, but what are the resources at our disposal that we can use for our community and respond to these direct needs? So it really started from this book, and it evolved into so much more. We have a journal that fosters expression. We're soon to come out with a suicide prevention documentary. And it's just being open to what we're hearing in our community and responding in the ways that we can.
I love that. Very, very important. Yes. Go ahead, everybody, give a clap.
So when we started our program, Project Path, or when we decided to start our program in 2022, not many people knew about opioids. Fentanyl was a new topic. But we know that historically, because of what was happening in the States, that historically the drugs do make its way eventually on island. So we were seeing it in treatment, but of course it wasn't as great as it was in the States. So that kind of gave us an advantage, so that we can put in place the proper prevention measures, the proper programs, proper training, the proper education, so that we can better prepare our community for when it does eventually come to island. So with that, we had already started doing training of trainers for opioid overdose response training. If you haven't seen, I should have brought my prop. There's an naloxone vending machine that is outside of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center that dispenses free naloxone for the community. And this is really just our proactive approach to ensure that we as a community are better equipped to respond, especially because we also, now it's like the hot topic, right? Everything in the news that we see, we're seeing fentanyl, we're talking about overdose, we're seeing it coming in through customs. So we're better prepared, I would say, and that we have services that are available. We have our detox unit. So that's really, our way of combating an opioid crisis on island.
Very, very important work you're all doing. And again, taking this opportunity to come at it from a different side or a different approach, I think it's genius, right? There's so many different people. How much of your approach was based on where the need was versus coming up with a plan to take care of a problem? Do you feel me? Like, how much of it, and I think Robbie brought it up in our last panel, she said, meet her there, meet her where she's at, right? How much of that goes into your planning? Obviously, these are all, I don't want to say like specialized, approaches, but maybe that is the best word to use. Because there are people who would benefit more from more physical interaction and treatment. There are people who would take that creative step and want to do writing and want to journal some more. And then there are folks who just want to be able to say that they're prepared and look out for their family. How much of what goes into your organization's planning centers around meeting them where they are and the needs of those communities? Anybody?
I think For us, it's everything because again, we're a community-based publisher, and we throw around that word a lot. And like, what is community? But it's really who we're serving on this island. It's being receptive to their feedback, and so we do have our own. We have a very talented team of professionals who come together and talk about, okay, what do we need more of in our, applying our expertise in publishing. But it's through our outreach events where we really garner a lot of productive feedback from our community and what they would need, what they want more from us, whether that be generative writing workshops to help them create something that's always been in their head, but they're not sure how to put into paper, or maybe a candid conversation about suicide, which we, again, can provide in more creative, in other ways, like through publications or video resources, things like that. So I would say it's a large part of our goals at the press.
Yeah, I would say on the Ina Wellness side, we started during the pandemic, literally a couple weeks before the pandemic, and that really made it super clear that there were not only a ton of physical health conditions, but mental health was going to be a huge thing to support well beyond the pandemic as well. So I think everything that we do is around prevention, and how do we really, again, inspire this lifestyle and give people tools and give people resources. But a big thing that we have focused on in looking ahead and looking at planning ahead, and one of the reasons why we collaborate with Guam Behavioral Health on WellFest, which is Guam's first holistic health festival, is there's so many people doing amazing work in the community, and how do we bring those people together with this collaborative mindset and this abundance mindset of how do we collectively lift and raise everyone up using all of the talents in the room, using all of the amazing practitioners. So it is focused on what can we do to prevent, but also what if we all decided to have this collaboration mindset, and what could that look like for future prevention as well.
Well, I love data. So, of course, our program takes a data-driven approach for whatever that we do. So we take a look at what is happening in the community. And you'll be surprised that in 2019, and I'm gonna throw out data, 16% of high school youth reported that they were taking taking medication without a doctor's prescription. And then in 2000,
Whoa.
yeah, prior to that, the year prior to that, so 2017, when the survey was done, it was at 11%. So we're seeing a gradual increase with that. But also, we're seeing that people want to be informed. They want to be prepared. So really, what we're providing, I know, maybe providing naloxone free to the community is kind of a radical idea, right? Some people are kind of well, what are you doing, right?
It's true. Some people are like, oh, you're encouraging it? Now that they know there's a free vending machine, they can just go there and do that and then do that, right?
Right, and I really want to debunk that.
Debunk it.
Because I will. One, naloxone, there's no abuse potential for it. So you can't abuse naloxone. Two, providing something like that, a life-saving medication, really doesn't encourage people to use it, because it gives really uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms when someone is overdosing on opioids. But three, we have to be, when we think about opioids, and I don't want to get so technical here, but there's so many different aspects of it, right? We're seeing it, opioids is a prescribed medication, so you can get that right from your doctor for pain.
Where do you find opioids? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So opioids is usually prescribed for pain, right? So you can get it from your doctor.
But what are some of the names?
Hydrocodone, there's morphine. So that's the usually prescribed opioids. But then what's so dangerous is that you're seeing the illicit part of it. You're seeing fentanyl, right? And that's the fake pills that are coming in that people might be accidentally overdosing. So that's why it's just so important, because you have individuals who might take something that they don't know is laced with fentanyl, right? Or they're not intending to take it. But then having naloxone on hand gives them that life-saving measure in case of anything happens.
So does naloxone?
Yes.
It goes for opioids and for the fentanyl also?
Yes, because fentanyl is an opioid.
Thank you.
Come to our opioid overdose response trainings to get better informed. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you very much for that. Let's get a round of applause. A lot of folks. obviously we want to try to get to a place of prevention, right? We want to get to these people, to our loved ones before it becomes a situation where we have to try to bring them back. What are your thoughts on prevention? And this one everybody can answer. We don't have to go down the line. What is your thoughts on the importance of prevention, and how have you kind of seen that work in terms of your products and your projects?
I think for us, we've really looked at how do we get further and further down the line in prevention, where, at first, obviously, a lot of our clientele is the people we work with are adults, but last year we ran a kids program, 10 to 13-year-olds, called Coconut Kids. Hannah, who is on the panel, was helping us with that as well. And we decided to say, okay, let's look before the parents, right? And let's really explore working with kids, teaching them mindfulness, teaching them tools that they can use for managing their emotions, for communication. It was a really fun 6-week program. We learned a lot about kids. And from that, it even inspired how do we look even before that. So a lot of the work that we're doing right now is with pregnant women, and how do we support a healthy pregnancy, healthy family introduction into postpartum. And so really looking at the whole spectrum of prevention of what happens even before the child gets here. How do they get into how do healthy habits become part of that lifestyle, and then how do we support them through the ages? So yeah, that's been a 2 new sort of programs that have been introduced in the past year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people come to the programs. I mean, like you said earlier, it's kind of taboo when some people think about it. Oh, I'm too tough for yoga. Oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, I'm gonna go lift weights. Are you seeing, since you've been here and since you started this, kind of like an increase in those numbers?
Definitely. There are people that, and a big piece of it is word of mouth. People come, they bring their friends, they bring their partner, they bring their kids. And so, when someone comes in, and we kind of take the stigma away of taking care of yourself is not something to be ashamed of. It is something, that is only gonna, sort of radiate out into the world. We also work with a lot of teams, so a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. And so starting there at how can we not all be burned out, right? And how can we manage our stress? And so that has been also a key way to reach more people, is going into these organizations and teams and teaching them about stress management, burnout, a toolkit that they can use well beyond the workday too.
Very nice. I'm gonna ask you later to help us breathe,
Yes.
so be prepared for that. Okay, Via, you talk about your project and the Billy project and everything that kind of goes into that. That's a huge one. And I think right now, more than ever before, there's a lot of folks kind of shining light onto that mental health of the typical man. And when I say the typical man, it's because typically us men, they, stop crying, like that. So how do you find that your team and your project is helping that along, especially here on Guam? Because culturally, I find, this is just based on my experience, it's a tough hill to climb in terms of referencing mental health with anybody. Because even the ladies in my family, they're the ones too, I'm tough, watch me. I'm from Georgia, I can take after her coconut house with my teeth, So how do you get in through that?
Yeah, I love that question, and I feel very passionate about this specific topic because, for our documentary, we did interview. It was important to us to get a range of voices, but we also especially wanted to get the perspectives of, again, the male community on Guam, especially Chamorro Micronesian males, because they are among the highest at risk for suicide. And these conversations we had were very insightful. So I don't know if I want to name drop them quite yet, but we did speak to retired firefighters. And when you're in that environment where you're constantly introduced to trauma, there's a certain response that you adapt, or you transform the way that you approach your emotions, because you need to be ready on site. There's not really much room for a crisis during a crisis situation that you're trying to help with. So these firefighters, they were so open and vulnerable about their experiences, sharing that they were raised by a generation that went through the traumas of war, and strength to them looked a lot different than it does to our current generation, which is a lot more open. But they recognized that while they did have their own vices, whether that be alcoholism or drug abuse or even pornography, that they knew that those weren't the best coping mechanisms for them, and they hope for the next generation that they're able to find better ways to express those emotions or understand them. And so really the way to do that is to just continue having conversations with members of our community who we don't always hear from, encouraging that those candid discussions and show them the effects of what their honesty is putting out into our community. And so yeah, I hope that helps answer that question.
I feel better already. Thank you. Go ahead, Audrey. What are you thinking?
About prevention?
Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, opioids, naloxone, all of these things, they're so new to me because I've come from a suicide prevention program, right? I work suicide prevention. I work specifically like underage drinking and tobacco prevention. So when we talk opioids and we talk naloxone, I'm just like, like what? Because I didn't really understand it. But really, prevention is prevention, right? What we're doing, even if it gears towards like the harm reduction part, we're really getting into the homes. We're having people start conversations because really knowledge is power, right? When we put out our education on opioids or even just prescription medications, part of our program is that we're implementing health literacy so that people, whenever they go to the doctor, and most of the time, right, you get prescribed that we're really excited about is that we're launching a health communication campaign. So we're really working with a vendor to look and do research on the risk and protective factors that exist on Guam's youth to better drive our efforts.
You do love data. That is so much fun.
Yeah. No, it is fun, and it will be great. I'm gonna tell you.
She's correcting me. She's like, no, but it is fun.
No, it is fun because a lot of what we look at is stateside based. There's not a lot of local data.
Place-based data, right?
And local information that exists. So when we want to implement strategies, when we want to develop strategies and programs, we want to make sure that it's for our people, by our people. Nothing about us without us. That's what we say, right? Nothing about us without us.
Voting for you.
So it's so important to collect that data and so important to work with our youth and work in our community so that whatever we're producing meets their needs.
Agreed. And I think that this speaks more volumes to me personally because you've been involved with this program, PEACE, for a long, long time. I first met you, I don't even tell time in years anymore, I do it in pounds. I met you 30 pounds ago, for me personally. How old were you when you started working with the team?
Well, when we met, I was actually a youth member with the Youth for Youth Live Guam organization. And we were doing, I don't know how old I was. I was a teenager, like 16. We were doing like Youth Talk Today. And then here I am, I'm almost 30. So
and you love data.
Yeah, and I've been working with Guam Behavioral for about 11 years now. So, but really, I feel like I've been in the prevention field my whole life. So I feel like I'm a true testament of like prevention starts at home. Because of my grandma who brought me to every prevention meeting, conference possible that had those conversations with me in our home to get me to where I am today.
May I just add, I think everything that you're saying reaffirms what we found in our workshops. So we had a creative writing workshop centered around dry nights with a really talented group of students at George Washington High School. And when it came to the discussion portion, one of the students had mentioned that, I do want access to these resources, especially about mental health and suicide awareness, but he expressed that he was afraid that if he had brought it up to his mom, that it would cause this unnecessary worry, and the mom would be like, Is something going on? What's wrong?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and so, when you say that it begins at home, it really does. And so how do we foster these conversations in very positive ways in the home so that we're open to these questions, but also aware again of their risks? So I just love that you said that because it just aligns so well without even trying to.
Mm-hmm. And I think from a parent's perspective too, there's always going to be that level of protection. So even, with those discussions, you're right in saying if the kid came home, okay, I'll just tell you a true story, based on a true story. Like when my son came home and he was like, Daddy, you need to sign this so I can go talk to the counselor. I was like, about what? Just naturally. And like I said earlier, it's just me. So it's not like I could go and find out from some other parent in the house. So I was really like, what's going on? Is he okay? Did I do something? Does he not like to wash dishes anymore? Is it ruining his life? And so a lot goes into those thought processes as well. But like you said, it's the beginning, right? You talk about that, and then you can get into the bigger conversations so that, you can get through all of those. I also listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, so that scared me too. Because a lot, stuff goes on there. Okay, I'm sorry. The next question I have is about, obviously you all are moving towards, prevention and empowering people to express themselves in these different ways. What advice do you have to other organizations? And this could span not just with their clients, but maybe also their employees, their team members, their stakeholders. What advice do you guys have to anybody in the room or who may be watching later about empowering those involved in your projects or companies or families to feel like they can transformatively prevent anything that's coming up by adapting strategies in a shifting cultural landscape?
I can take this one. So the first thing that comes to mind is when, so I had mentioned Well Fest. It's our collaboration with Guam Behavioral Health, and it's now going on year 4 next year. But in the very beginning, when we started conversations, we were talking about, how do we create this, holistic wellness festival in Guam, bringing, all 400 plus people into the space, 40 vendors, and how do we have the conversation about mental health be present? And I remember initially I was thinking, okay, maybe we can have a panel, we can talk about therapy, or we can talk about, mental health topics. And, the team over at Guam Behavioral Health was like, let's have the event speak for itself, right? This whole event is promoting health and wellness and holistic health, and we don't have to talk so specifically about that heaviness. Let this event be a celebration and let it be sort of a light in the conversation. And yes, we can talk and can give resources about 988 and therapy and how they can use the resources, but that doesn't have to be the breakout session, for example. And one thing I've noticed with the event now, 3 years, is that some of the most popular breakout sessions within the event are the creative ones, right? Where people want to go paint and they want to do vision boards and they want to, express themselves. And so just knowing that health can be fitness, it can be yoga, it can be meditation, but it can also be art, it can also be music, it can also be creative expression, and allowing it to just speak for itself sometimes, right? Rather than have it be so we're gonna have a conversation about mental health, right? Allow the whole experience to be mental health prevention too. So that's the first example that came to mind.
Great example, great example. Ladies, anything else you wanna add to that? Advice that you would give to any of our attendees or anybody on the island who would like to kind of implement some of these thoughts and processes into their operations?
I think any advice would be, one, don't be afraid to think outside of the box. I think we're learning just by our panel here is that prevention is such an ever-changing field. Behavioral health is such an ever-changing field. I mean, before there was Moms Against Drug Driving, right? MAD, right? Or there was DARE. So it was very scare tactic kind of prevention. But we've really evolved to focusing on the positive things, right? Help-seeking behaviors, protective factors, which is really, what is happening right now in our community. So I think stepping outside the box and getting a little creative, even if it means, doing something as weird as giving a free naloxone to the community via vending machine, it works.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing is, of course, get other people involved, so we don't have to do the work that we do alone, and it will benefit I think all of us and better serve the community if we bring in people and experts and anyone who can kind of give a, what's the word I'm using? I'm trying to get at here. To give a better view of what we should be putting out there, you know? So sometimes we're kind of like at our ivory tower, like looking down, right? Like and we think that what we know is the only way to go.
That's true. Sometimes we get so caught up in it that we forget, like you said, to think outside the box every now and then. And then people have like perspective challenges where I'm like, but this is how it is because this is how it's always been. But if you take a little bit of a step to the right, you'll realize there's a whole different angle there that maybe we weren't privy to.
Right. And there's so many different views and people that exist. And the community is really, I feel so resilient and so willing and able to help and to participate and do anything that is needed to be done to make this island a better place. So kind of bringing everyone in and having that perspective, which is what we're doing now, right? We're ensuring that our partners are involved in every step of the way. And we know that we cannot do the work without our partners. So, yeah.
I think when speaking on the topic of thinking outside the box, I mean, I agree with everything these wonderful ladies are saying, but to add something new too is that I often get this, I often hear like, oh, I'm not creative, I can't do this, but you know, the act of creating, studies have shown that it increases your cognitive flexibility, and so that means that you're able to approach challenges differently, in different ways, look at the world in ways that other people aren't looking at. And so there's also one aspect of it, which is creating these opportunities or these resources for creative expression, but I think also participating in them too, and not forget that everyone has a creative side, and it's through that we're really able to foster these new solutions to these challenges that continue to plague our community.
Very, very, very good. Again, a lot of depth here, a lot of conversation to be had, and it's all about prevention through cultural intervention and getting everything kind of moving in that direction. Ladies, before we get to Q&A and we open it up to the room, what do you hope for? What is your dream scenario moving forward in terms of this cultural integration and the day-to-day life? What do you hope for our people here in the island and in the bigger picture, I guess, the whole world, in terms of our discussion today? Like, your work.
That's a big question. I'll try my best here. So, a few things. So, the first thing that when I think about, at least thinking about where we are on Guam, you know, one of the things that I have really, I guess, a mission as I continue to grow Wellness is we know a lot of what, it's kind of going back to like remembrance, right? Going back to what our ancestors were doing, going back to the healing practices that like we inherently know here, taking care of the land, taking care of our community. These are all things that we know, right? And so for me, a big mission has been like, how do we get people to remember that, right? Like bring that remembrance back into the mix. And, you know, I moved home because I wanted to start a family. I now have a 1.5 year little son running around.
Oh my goodness, she just had a baby. Everybody clap. Do it on Oprah. I'm doing it now.
Thank you. So I know, obviously, anyone in here that is a parent knows that as soon as you have a kid, that's your biggest why, right? Is like to make sure that they have an amazing place to grow up in and to kind of continue that. So that's a piece of why I've been really called to work with pregnant women and to start there and to continue to find different communities that we can, you know, again, start this movement in. So I think it's remembrance, like we have a lot of wisdom here on Guam and in our land and in our culture, and sort of bringing that back to the conversation too.
And I'm gonna touch on that too, because asking why is my favorite thing whenever we like start plannings or start a group, like what is your why? And when you've been in the field for a long time, sometimes you start to question what you're doing, right? You're like, well, what am I doing? Drug use is increasing, you know, suicide is increasing, mental health illnesses are increasing. And I've been at that point in my career where I'm like, you know, is it worth it, right? And then I think about my son. He's 3. And most definitely it is worth it. The work that we are doing is so worth it because we have to remember that what we're doing is we're creating safe spaces. I grew up in what I feel was a very safe space, and I want more than anything to be able to give that to my child and create that safe space for him so that he can grow up in a community that is free of alcohol, drugs, misuse, suicide. So yeah, I guess, my vision.
I love that. Beautiful.
I think this question reminds me of an interview question I had actually asked Dr. Christiana Whitman for our suicide prevention documentary, where I had asked her, well, what does successful prevention look like? And she had mentioned that, we're always making improvements, but really a successful, you're successful when your number's at 0 for those who might die by suicide, which is a lofty goal, but I think it takes a community to achieve, and we're making strides in doing that. I mean, just seeing everyone in this room already gives me hope that we could one day achieve that. So in terms of like a visible vision, that would probably be what I hope. And that our, again, different community organizations, including us at the press, continue to facilitate those conversations and those spaces, not just in suicide prevention, but also in drug prevention and also through wellness, through other means, so.
Wonderful answers, girls. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, with everybody's help here, the vision for a beautiful future could definitely be attained. Again, thank you so much. We're gonna, yes, clap. We're gonna open up to questions now. If anybody's got any questions for the team on stage, our panelists. Again, the discussion today has to do with prevention and incorporating cultural norms and shifts and changes into that approach. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll come to you with a microphone. Oh, hold on. No questions? Oh, who said that? Someone said I got a question? No? Okay, the room's very quiet. Okay, I guess we've got no questions. Thank you so much, ladies. Let's get around.